I'm really glad you're here because I'm a woman who had an abortion, and there wasn't this kind of thing in 1976 when I had my abortion. And I had no idea what I was doing as a 16-year-old to fix my problem, because that's how I looked at my pregnancy, was that it was a problem I had to fix. And somebody told me that an abortion would fix my problem, and that's what I did. I didn't ask any questions, and it was a whole different world. And now I see your activism, and I see your compassion and your heart to not only protect the babies, but protect the women. And it really excites me, and it really humbles me that I get to be here and share this with you. So thank you so much for being here. I would like to do a couple of things in a really short amount of time. So let's see if we can pull this off. Okay, let's start with this. I want to give you, oftentimes at these kind of conferences, we all make the assumption that everybody knows everything about the basics of abortion. And so I'm going to make sure you do, and I'm going to give you some information, and I'm going to run through it. And if anybody wants this PowerPoint presentation, let one of the girls know, and I'll email it to you. I forgot to do that this morning. So anyway, the reality of abortion from the woman's perspective. Well, first of all, we found out is that men are also struggling after abortion. So not only is it women, but it is men. So let's get some basics. In 2005, there were 1.2 million abortions that took place in America, which is about 3,300 a day. Worldwide, there are about 42 million abortions every year. China is the biggest culprit with their one-child policy. That's a lot of abortions.
How many pregnancies are there per year?
We don't. I don't have that data. You can look that data up, though, and because it is important information. But it is really hard to get that kind of information. There is some researchers out there that are looking at mother mortality and are able to get that information. So do a little digging, and I'll bet you find it. But it is quite amazing to think about. And the other important thing to note is that abortion is the most common surgical procedure that happens in the U.S. every year. And this is the statistic that we use. It's from the Yale and Guttmacher Institute, and they say that 43% of women under the age of abortion will have at least... try that one more time. 43% of women under the age of 45 will have at least one abortion. And one of the things that 40 Days for Life, we work very closely with them. And I had a couple of counselors call me over the last couple of weeks as 40 Days was winding up, and they were like, Georgette, we're trying to reach these girls when they're going into these clinics, and they're just like stone. What can we say to help them choose life? And I said to them, what you're not thinking about is this might be their third, fourth, or fifth abortion. Because what we're seeing is that women are having multiple abortions. Here in Pennsylvania, statistics showed on Planned Parenthood's website that the average woman who has multiple abortions in Pennsylvania are having 5 abortions. Okay? And now, some of you immediately think, well, she's using it as birth control. And in some ways she is, but it's important to know that when she's really doing is it's called traumatic reenactment. She's actually looking for a different outcome. And so she keeps getting pregnant again. And she keeps ending up with the same results, and it shuts her down, and it hardens her heart, and it turns her into stone little by little. So she is mechanically walking into that Planned Parenthood clinic, and you can't reach her because she has already shut down her heart. Let's break down abortion by age. And it's important to note that 57% of the women having abortions are in their 20s, and fewer than 1% are younger than 15. I'm just going to buzz through these real quick. And again, if you want the slides, I'll send them to you so you don't have to make notes on all of this. The number of, when you break it down by ethnicity, it's really interesting to see that Hispanics and black women, African American women, make up about half of our half of all half of all abortions that are happening. I'm trying to talk fast so I can get through all this information.
It's okay
not
if you need
working.
to take more time.
Yeah, you guys are.
Yeah, we're cool.
I'm always like every minute. But
no, we're cool.
You're cool. Okay. Okay. So the thing that we have learned and that we're focusing in on this particular slide is the fact that African American women represent only realistically 13% of the population, but they have over 38% of all the abortions. They are having the vast majority of abortions, and therefore the majority of children being killed are African American. And it's a genocide on a particular ethnic group, and that needs to be addressed. Religious affiliation. 13% of abortion patients say they're born again or evangelical Christians. And I think that's really important to note because we tend to think that these are all people that don't have any religious background. And it's really not true. Not only that, 27% say they're Catholic and 43% claim to be Protestant. Okay, when are abortions performed? This is, again, a piece of information that's really important to know, because this is the kind of stuff that, what was his name that was talking about knowing your information? I don't know
Phil.
your name. Phil.
Yeah.
Phil was talking about knowing your information. This is the kind of information you need to know about when abortions are performed. 89% of all abortions are performed during the first 12 weeks of a pregnancy. 10% occur from week 13 to 20, and after week 20, it's about 13. That number is for 2005, and the other day we were doing some research in Planned Parenthood information, and they actually showed 18,000 for 2010 that were late-term abortions after 20 weeks. So that number is fluctuating and growing.
So when does it usually start showing a pregnancy? I mean, at what point in this?
Does a woman's pregnancy begin to, like she's...
When does it,
When, it really varies depending on the build of a woman.
Yeah, but like on average.
I would say realistically somewhere between 15 and 20 weeks. What you'll actually notice before you'll notice anything in the stomach is her boobs. Mm-hmm. Her boobs get big really early in the game. Usually around week 10, she's changed a bit. That's how my mom thought I was pregnant, actually. That was the weirdest part. She said to my sister, something's different about her. But she didn't want to face that. Anyway, why are abortions performed? This is a really critical talking point, especially when you're doing any kind of interaction with people, because Planned Parenthood loves to talk about the fact that we have to have abortion for rape and incest victims, and for the issues of a mother who's facing a health crisis, or their child, the baby has been there's a prenatal diagnosis with the baby. All of those circumstances make up 7% of all of the abortions that are happening in this country. 93% of the abortions are happening for elective reasons. So that is a really critical piece of data to have and to be able to share and communicate that, because that is it's kind of the lie that keeps getting perpetuated. So break it. Okay, 65% of the women report some level of pressure or coercion by family, friends, employers, universities, or sexual predators, that they feel pressured into having the abortion. I can't tell you how many women have said to me, my parents basically told me, they threatened me that if I didn't have the abortion, they would kick me out because I was going to embarrass the family. So that's a very realistic problem. Boyfriends or husbands threaten to leave. Right now we're seeing, with the economic problems that the country is facing, we're seeing a lot more of abortion taking place because people feel like they can't afford it. Well, imagine that you're a woman and you're pregnant and you want to have this baby, but your husband's saying, I can't afford it. We can't afford to have this baby. Or your boyfriend. can't afford another child. We've already got 3 children. There's no way. So the woman feels she has no choice but abortion. 38 years of legalized abortion has resulted in 52 million abortions and millions of women dealing with the personal consequences. And when we deal with the consequences, we deal with it spiritually, emotionally, as well as physically. It affects us spiritually because we feel that what happens when we have an abortion is we, in essence, go against what we're designed as women to do. As women, we're designed to nurture life. That's why we have a womb, a uterus. And when we have an abortion, we interrupt that process. But more than that is that we interrupt how we're made. We try to change it. And that affects us to our core. That affects women to our very being. It calls into question who we really are. And it changes how we see who we are as a child of God. I remember thinking when I became a Christian, I had my abortion when I was 16 years old, and I was almost 23 years old when I became a Christian. I remember thinking, God can forgive all my other sins, but my abortion is not forgivable by Him. I'm sure it's not forgivable because it was a life. And that was one of those few moments that I allowed myself, when I accepted Jesus into my heart, to honestly look at my abortion and say that it ended a life. But for the majority of time, I would basically live in denial and pretend that it didn't happen, because that was the easiest way for me to cope with it. So it truly affects us spiritually. It also affects us physically. There's like some sort of heat coming on around. Oh, it's all of this equipment. That's what it is. Yeah. I'm in menopause now, so I have heat flashes. So you don't want anything hot around you that might prompt even more. It's like, please. Sorry. TMI. Okay, the physical aspects of abortion. The Royal College of Obstetrics and Gynecology in England did some research to look at what the numbers are in England related to the physical consequences for women after abortion. And they found that a minimum of 10% of women had some sort of physical complication. And that could be cervical trauma, uterine perforation, hemorrhaging, infection, some sort of problem. So if you take that same idea and you apply it to the 1.2 million abortions that we have in this country, just using the same kind of statistic based on the fact that their abortions are performed in the same kind of scenarios here as there, we're looking at 120,000 women each year that suffer some sort of complication as a possibility. The problem we have is that we can't exactly get that kind of statistic, because when women go into an emergency room, they don't tell the doctor that they had an abortion procedure performed. They just present the symptoms. So we have huge reporting issues in being able to identify the real physical consequences related to abortion, because the data is just not shared, and that information is very rarely available. Long-term health problems can include increased risk of breast cancer or cervical or ovarian cancer. Abortion can also lead to infertility due to hysterectomies, pelvic inflammatory disease, and miscarriage. Abortion can cause complications during future pregnancies, such as premature birth, placenta previa, and ectopic pregnancies. And women still die from abortion. It's important to know that, because oftentimes people think, well, once we legalized abortion, it stopped, it made it really safe. And most abortions tend to be safe, but they're not always safe. And we do know that women are dying during the procedures still, and we know that women are also committing suicide because of the abortion. So we are seeing increases in the number of women dying surrounding abortion circumstances. and then it creates
an increase, not just a steady, the sameness.
No, there's an increase, and I'm going to pass out some literature. In fact, this is a good time to do this. These are actually the information sheets, the shortcuts on this, and it has all the data on the back, all the notes, so you can do some additional research on it. I have a lot of these. I don't want to carry this material back to Pittsburgh with me, so I want you to take multiple copies and take them for your clubs and your groups. So I'm going to go ahead and just have you take those and take a bunch of them and move them along, and so you can see some additional information here. But the psychological issues that are created from abortion are wide-ranging. And a lot of the time, that what we find happens is that we're dealing with a psychological issue, maybe depression. And you go to a psychiatrist, and he starts giving you Zoloft and different kinds of antidepressant drugs. And you say to the doctor, well, I had an abortion when I was 16 years old. Oh, well, that couldn't have anything to do with it. That was a lot of years ago, and abortion there's no problem with abortion. And so the psychologist, the psychiatrist, has just buzzed right over what might really be your issue. And we see it over and over again that women have spent 10, 15, 20 years going from doctor to doctor to doctor, dealing with all kinds of problems, emotional and physical problems. A lot of emotional problems manifest themselves physically, and they don't ever kind of get to the root of it. And then somebody will mention something about an abortion healing program, and they'll go to a Rachel's Vineyard weekend retreat, and like that, all their symptoms disappear, and their lives are radically changed. It's because they've been given permission to address their pain. And what happens, and it's something that everybody in this room can relate to, is that we've all had traumatic events happen in our lives. It might have been being in a car accident. It might have been that a family member, one of your parents died when you were little, or there was a fire, and you were involved in it. It could have been, some sort of accident. But everybody in this room can relate to having a traumatic event that you can immediately go to when I talk about this, that you think back to and you can feel. And it has affected who you are still today, and it influences you, but you don't even realize it. And I always call that like connecting the dots, because when we connect the dots on how our behavior is affecting us today and what the root cause of it is, then we can get back to fixing and addressing the root cause. And for so many women, abortion is seen to be this like non-issue. I had one woman actually tell Jennifer O'Neill, she was doing a debate with Jennifer O'Neill, and she described abortion as the equivalent of having your tooth pulled. Like, that was how much it was a non-issue. Go back to work the same day, it was that not big of a deal. But the problem is, as I said earlier, is we are designed to give life. So when you have an abortion, you are traumatizing your core being, and you don't realize it. Oftentimes because you're actually medicated, and you go home and you keep medicating. And that's what I did, is I just kept medicating. Pot, alcohol, whatever I could do. After, dealing with my abortion, I went to my sister's that night. I cried and I cried. I was so relieved, but I kept crying. And I couldn't stop crying, and I finally went to sleep in the fetal position. I woke up the next morning and started crying again. And thinking, how do I get my act together and go home? And I decided that I would pretend that Saturday, October 4th, never happened. And that's how I got through it. And I medicated myself. I numbed myself so that I wouldn't think about it. I taught myself to deny it because it was too traumatic to deal with. And that's really what we do. And then we have all these experiences. We deal with nightmares. We have reoccurring insomnia. We have alcohol and drug abuse. We have suicidal feelings and attempting suicide. We experience difficulties in developing or maintaining relationships. We have loneliness issues. Anger issues are huge for us. Indecision, a sense of self-hatred. Oftentimes, our sense of self-hatred will manifest itself in either dating a bunch of guys that really abuse us, or actually choosing to abuse ourselves. And oftentimes, I've run into women and met women who spent years cutting or self-mutilating. I was working with one woman, and we were doing a television interview together. And she had told me that she had some, self-mutilating issues before she had found healing. And so I knew that this was there. But she rolled up her sleeves during the interview, and she showed the scars on her arms. And I audibly gasped because I was shocked at how many there were and how deep and how profoundly the pain, you could see the pain in it. But she said the thing that broke her out of and made her realize that she was in trouble was that one night she had actually taken a paring knife and she started trying to cut off her foot because she kept feeling the stirrup on her ankle. Because when we have the abortion, they put our legs up in stirrups. And as a 16-year-old, they put my legs up in stirrups. I had never had that happen. I was not prepared for that. So traumatically, you're shutting down left and right. You're overwhelmed with the emotion of it all.